A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards, coming to you from beautiful Farmville, Virginia. Today, the epicenter of the gun control movement in the United States at the moment. Well, not Farmville specifically, but Virginia, where yesterday we had 4 gun control bills clear the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, so far, so you know, those bills have not been scheduled for a vote on the floor of the Senate, but that is the next stop for those bills. You should also know that there is more to come. So I want to get right to it. Dave Adams is the Legislative Affairs Director for the Virginia Shooting Sports Association. He was in Richmond. He was in the room yesterday, as a matter of fact, as anti-gun Democrats approved these 4 gun control bills on a party line vote of 9-5. There were some changes to some of these bills, nothing that makes them supportable, but slightly less awful, I think maybe is the way to describe at least one of these bills. Take a look and a listen as we break them all down with Dave Adams, Legislative Affairs Director for the Virginia Shooting Sports Association. Dave, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
Thanks for having me back, Cam.
Yeah, it was a crazy day at the Capitol on Monday, and we'll get into some of the nuttiness here. But let's talk about, I think, what's most important to our audience, and that is the 4 gun control bills that cleared the Senate Judiciary Committee in Virginia on Monday.
Okay. There were 4, one having to do with so-called universal background checks, one having to do with so-called red flag laws, one dealing with handgun rationing, and then one that deals with local control. It starts to chip away at preemption by allowing local boards of supervisors or city council to pass ordinances to prevent people from carrying firearms at a permitted event or to ban them from their governing board chambers. Okay.
And so some of these bills, these are the bills that, again, cleared the committee. There were some changes. Let's start with the background check bill, because this is kind of interesting. Chap Peterson, who is a Democrat from Northern Virginia, offered some amendments to the bills to the background check bill that Brian Moran, the Secretary of Public Safety, and Moms Demand Action were not happy about.
No, basically what he did was remove the word transfer in the section of the bill that dealt with people other than dealers conducting background checks before they could sell a firearm. As you are aware, there's in all these laws across the country that have passed these universal background checks, the word transfer is always in there. And transfer means something more than just sales. It's loaning your firearm to somebody at the range or loaning it to someone to go hunting with you, and numerous other things. Senator Peterson first said, look, I want to get rid of all these exemptions, which he did. That's one of the things that, is not a good thing about what he did. Mm-hmm. But what he also did was that he took out the word transfer and dealt with sales and said if you sell a firearm for either money, services, or exchange something of value, that's the only thing that's covered. So if I'm going to buy a firearm and give it to my brother for a Christmas present, mm-hmm. I can do that because it's no exchange of money or service or thing of good, or service of goods. And
but if you're selling that same firearm to your brother, you would he would have to go through the background check, right? Even though he's a family member.
Exactly right. So the bad part about what Senator Peterson did was he took out all exemptions. The good part is that all the other things that could have been impacted by this bill are no longer there because the word transfer is taken away. And that's why Secretary Moran, Moms Demand Action, Lori Haas, they all got up there, said they were opposed to the substitute. They prefer the original version of the bill. And they all decided to report it out of committee, knowing this is just the first step. Mm-hmm. All that stuff that Senator Peterson did could be taken out on the floor, or could be taken out by the governor if it passes in that form.
Okay, wait a second. So let's say the bill as it stands right now, passes, gets to the governor's desk, the governor could simply change the language and change the intent of the law?
No, he could send down an amendment at the reconvened session. He could
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, or he could send down a substitute and they'd vote on it. So this is, I just want the listeners to know, this is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. This is just cut one, but while we're still opposed to it, it's better than what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It still has some issues, still has some problems, as does the red flag legislation that was approved by the committee. Now that bill was amended as well yesterday, correct?
Yes. In fact, the Senator Sorovell from Alexandria had a number of line amendments to it. I mean, just more than what we could go through here. But basically what he did, without addressing a lot of the concerns that gun owners have about the bill and that VSSA and NRA has about the bill, he'd added some additional, what he said, protections were, and it doesn't get anywhere near the types of things we'd like to see changed in the bill. But it was changed quite a bit. And there again, another member of the committee, Senator Morrissey, is not happy with it. He said, I'm going to vote to report this out of committee, understanding this is a first step. But he told me personally on the way out the door as he was heading up to the Capitol for the session yesterday, I'm not voting for it in the condition that it's in right now. So there is an opportunity, and we're working with him. Our lobbyist is going to be working with him, giving him a list of changes we'd like to see made to the bill. We may get some of those and not all of them, but it's a first step. And hearing something positive from Senator Morrissey like that gave us a little hope we can still make some changes to the bill.
Yeah, that's the thing that I want gun owners, not only in Virginia but around the country to understand here, is that one of the goals of this session, given the Democratic majority, it would be great if we could defeat these bills. But if we can't, then the attempt is to try to mitigate the damage that these bills could do to the rights of law-abiding gun owners.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that the VSSA has always tried to do is work with relationships. Our lobbyist, besides being a gun guy, used to be with the Crime Commission back in the 90s, and then he worked for Attorney General Jerry Kilgore as one of his deputies. So he's got a lot of relationships with some of the older members of the committee and the legislature that were there back then. And so he's using his relationships to try to lessen some of the damage these bills can do to us. And we're working at, especially on assault weapons, the so-called assault weapons legislation that's still circulating out there. There are some folks that, even though there's no rural members in the Democrats, there's a couple that have rural areas in their district. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to be working those relationships.
Okay, so and we're going to get to the quote-unquote assault weapons ban because that briefly came up in the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday. But let's talk about one gun a month. This is a law that was on the books in Virginia. It was taken off of the books about a decade ago. By the way, violent crimes continue to drop in the state since this law was repealed, but Democrats love it, anti-gun advocates love it, and they want to bring it back. Gun rationing that would restrict the legal purchase of a handgun to one per month. There are some exemptions, at least there were as the bill was introduced for concealed carry licensees. Was that bill amended at all yesterday, Dave?
They rolled two bills into one. They both were identical. One was Saslaw's bill, one was Senator Lucas's bill, and because Senator Lucas has been working this for years, they gave her the opportunity to use her bill as a vehicle, and they're both listed as co-patrons. But it takes us back to post-2004, but pre-2012, meaning that it's handgun rationing except for those folks who have a concealed handgun permit. Okay.
And then that last bill that you talked about that was passed out of committee yesterday, again, going after firearms preemption. It's interesting that, you've had the governor and the attorney general and, other lawmakers, bash the Second Amendment sanctuary movement, saying, these localities can't set their own laws and they can't decide what laws they want to enforce. And yet they're perfectly happy, it looks like, allowing localities to put their own gun control laws on the books. If you're taking a step in the other direction and you're trying to protect the Second Amendment rights of residents, that's a no-no. But if you want to restrict the rights of residents, again, lawmakers, at least the Democrat majority in the Senate Judiciary Committee, wants to empower those cities to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've tried to turn conservatives' words back on them. Conservatives, when it comes to things, are real. They believe that the best government is that which is local, and so the patron of the bill threw that right back in the face of the GOP members by saying, "Look, localities know best what's better for their area than the General Assembly does."
Interesting. All right. Now, you mentioned the gun ban bill by Senator Dick Saslaw. This is the one that does not have a grandfather clause in it. Simply, if the law were to go into effect, the legal owners of these banned firearms, magazines, suppressors, trigger activators would have to either turn them into police or remove them from the state of Virginia or destroy them. And Senator Saslaw had said, well, we're going to amend this bill. It looks like instead, Democrats are going to be using a House Bill 961, as their gun ban vehicle because SB 16, Senator Saslaw's bill, was killed in committee yesterday.
Yeah, and that was one of those circus things that went on that I spoke about earlier. The bill is not on the docket, and so according to Senate rules, you're not supposed to take up any bill and do anything with it if it's not on the docket. Mm-hmm. Senator Edwards, who's chairman of the committee, was going through various bills that were going to be stricken by request of the patron. The bills that he did do that with were on the docket. Senate Bill 16 was not, and when he tried to strike the bill at Saslaw's request, the Republican members said, look, we don't have any problem with you striking the bill, but you can't do that because it's not on the docket. In the end, Edwards did what he wanted to do. It struck the bill. I still think there may be a Senate bill that comes down because they've got until Friday to introduce something. I'm a little surprised that a Senate bill didn't come down at the same time a House bill did, but it would surprise me if there's only a House version that they deal with.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're right. 17th is the filing deadline, so we are not out of the woods yet in terms of all of the gun control legislation that could be introduced. And certainly, again, the Senate approving these 4 measures yesterday, Governor Northam has declared he wants 8 different gun control measures. So we're not done yet by a long shot, even in terms of the first committee hurdles for a lot of these bills. But let's talk about some of the shenanigans, Dave, because Friday the Democrats in the House and Senate imposed this gun ban for the first time in decades at the state capitol and the office buildings. And they said they did this. First of all, they said they did this at the request of the state police, even though the Capitol Police chief, the colonel in charge there, said no, we didn't request this. Democrats came to us and asked how best to actually implement this, and we told them, well, here's what you do to implement this. But Democrats trying to make it trying to make it seem like law enforcement was behind that push when it was their move. So Monday, the first day that this gun ban's in effect, huge delays for both citizens and staffers to try to get in the building. In fact, the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on these gun control bills supposed to start at 8 a.m. It was delayed by more than an hour. Was that because of the difficulties that people were having simply getting into the Capitol?
Yeah, it has to be. I never heard an actual reason why they started an hour late, but that has to be what it was because staffers couldn't get in, and you have staffers that are in the committee meeting. Typically, what would happen prior to Friday is that staff members, anyone with credentials, which include the press and lobbyists, would come in a separate entrance, and they would just go right through, whereas anyone else had to go through a metal detector. Yesterday, everybody had to. I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I went in the back entrance. Rich Savage, who was our lobbyist, suggested I'd use the rear entrance because it's just faster. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. And I'm glad I did because I had no wait, but that was at 7 o'clock in the morning. Apparently that was short-lived because it was lines out both sides of the building.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, you say that everybody had to go through this. Graham Mumma, who's a reporter for the Virginia Mercury, tweeted out that he had seen numerous executive staffers bypass this line completely and walk right on in. which it really does seem, Dave, that this, over the past week or so, we have seen Democrats decide that when they don't like the rules, they simply won't follow them.
Yeah, it's interesting that when when Secretary Moran got up there to first speak in favor of one of the gun control bills, Senator Obenchain asked him if he had to go through the security practice. Well, he kind of paused for a minute and then said, yes, he did. And then Obenchain followed up, well, do you know if any other members of the administration did? He says, well, I don't know, but we will check into that. I think Secretary Moran knew what Obenchain was getting to.
And so, again, to me, Dave, it just seems like, obviously gun control advocates, they're in control right now in the state legislature, but the disrespect, I think that these anti-gun politicians have shown the thousands of Virginians who showed up yesterday, the tens of thousands that have shown up at county supervisors meetings and city hall meetings around the state. They don't want to talk with us. They want to talk down to us. It seems like they don't really care what we have to say, at least many of them. They just want us to shut up and comply.
That's exactly right. It was like a foregone conclusion yesterday what was going to happen. The bills were going to get out one way or the other, even if they were amended. There were some very thoughtful people that got up there from the public that spoke against the bills. The sheriff from Culpeper was even there and stood up and spoke against a couple of the bills. But in the end, the Democrats know they have the numbers, and they're going to get these bills out. And they didn't really, it was like they didn't care what members of the public said. The one dealing with localities, a woman got up and spoke about why she carries a concealed handgun and how that would prevent her possibly from doing it if her locality were to change the rules. And it was lost on them completely. And there were a lot of folks of all types. There were minorities there yesterday. There were women. There were men. Despite what Shannon Watts posted on Twitter yesterday. But, very thoughtful folks. I was so proud of the public that showed up yesterday because they were polite. They did not clap. They did not make any comments when the other side got up and gave their position on the bill. And they got up and they spoke, it was from the heart. You knew that this was something that was important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one more a bit of shenanigans that we should address. You talk about the crowd that had shown up. It sounds like that gun owners and Second Amendment supporters far outnumbered gun control advocates yesterday. But if you actually looked inside that committee room, it would appear that there was equal representation. That was because, again, of another rule change by Democrats to limit the number of pro-Second Amendment voices in that committee room. Basically, for every person who opposed these bills, Democrats said, well, we want somebody in here who supports these bills, even though that's not what the crowd at the Capitol was representative of yesterday.
That's exactly right. And there's nothing that would have kept the other side from having people in there. Members can invite specific people to come in and speak for a bill. But yeah, they actually, and I saw some folks that they were a little perturbed, and I can understand that, but it wasn't the Capitol Police's fault, and it wasn't the state police who were also there with a large presence. They were just doing what they were told to do. Committee members set the rules. They're told to, go find other people to fill seats. And that's how that happened. The Capitol Police and state police did a great job yesterday. But, it was people were in line at 7 o'clock in the morning. When I got there, my credentials get me in the building easy, but I got to stand in line to get in that room just like everybody else does.
Right.
And there were people there that were there about the same time that I was that didn't get in because they had to bring in 4 or 5 other people from the other side to get in.
That's just absolutely, again, it's outrageous, but it's going to be par for the course this legislative session, I think. So these bills that passed out yesterday, Dave, they're now headed to the Senate floor. Do we know when they might be coming up for a vote on the Senate floor? And then what's going on with the House side of things? When do we have our first House committee hearings?
the House bills haven't even been referred to committee yet. And I double checked that with Rich, our lobbyist, this morning, just to make sure, because I know that there's been some lag in the legislative information system, with items showing up. And so when I talked to him, he says, "Are you sure about that?" He says, pre-filed bill should have already been referred. And I said, "I'm looking at the first bill that was dropped, and it still said committee assignment pending." So I don't have a clue what's going on in the House right now. The Senate, on the other hand, will let members know as soon as they're on the calendar, and they should be contacting their legislator now anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. Your state senator and your delegate as well. Dave Adams with the Virginia Shooting Sports Association. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thanks for everything you do, and look forward to doing this again very soon.
Cam, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Dave Adams joins us from the Virginia Shooting Sports Association here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company.